How's it, guys? I'm Richard. I'm an alcoholic. So that took a while. Been 2.5 years, and I've been in Scotland basically 2.5 years, and it's only my first year now. And I know it's not really about the milestone and stuff, but for me it was a big deal getting here. There's so much to tell. There's not just so much about like the past and the war stories and stuff, but just these last 2.5 years. I did a share on Friday, and I missed out like a bunch of stuff, and I hope I can get it all in. And yeah, I'm only sitting here, by the grace of God, and I was never someone that would ever own that to anyone that God did for me, something that I couldn't do for myself. I laughed at the idea of God, and I discounted any kind of opinion or belief in it. And now today, like I know that 100% that I'm only sitting here because of God's grace, and for that I'm really grateful, and for this fellowship. So yeah, I'll just get straight into it. I guess what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. I was born in Durban to an extremely loving, unconditional loving, compassionate, just like really amazing family. I was the Lat Lamaki. I came 6 years after my brother, and I had a type of childhood that I guess people could say like I had nothing. I was left nothing for, like I was never left wanting of anything. My dad worked hard, and my mom ran the house. She was English, and so we grew up in that kind of English household. With like very strong Christian values, and yeah, just a lot of family orientated stuff. My dad made time for us always, and my mom bent over backwards for us. It was an incredible upbringing. I can't say there was nothing that happened in my childhood that I believe has anything to do with what happened to me or what I did. I mentioned on Friday that I was sitting in a group, and the step meeting here on a Wednesday, and I was sitting in a step 4 group, and everyone went around the circle, and they were talking about like all their resentments, and the common thread in the whole group was like abuse and like sexual abuse and all this like terrible stuff that happened to them when they were young. And I realized that I didn't have that. That wasn't my experience. For me, it was only love and compassion, and that made me realize that like this nightmare I'd created was all of my own doing. There was nothing that preempted it, which led me to believe that the way I am, just the person I'd become, or just my behavior, led to my rock bottom. Can't blame it on anything else other than myself. School for me was hard. I was diagnosed with ADD and ADHD and dyslexia. I sat in the front of the class. I was medicated from an early age, from the age of 7. So I guess you can say that was like my first experience. Not that I was aware of it, but I remember quite vividly actually that after a couple of weeks of being on the course of that medication, I started taking it on the weekend without even asking. I just went and took it. And I don't know why, but that was just strange. My parents were like, wow, that's a bit strange. My brother, as I said, my brother and sister were quite far ahead of me, and my brother was this like incredible sportsman and a good pupil, and I felt like I had to fill his shoes, and I never could. Like I wasn't like he was on the sports field, and I definitely wasn't like he was in the classroom, and that like I struggled with that. I developed like quite a hectic stutter. I couldn't do like a class oral in front of anyone other than the teacher, and even that was hard. Even to this day I struggle with that, like just fear of speaking in a group. But what this program's taught me is that I've got to walk through that and try. I struggled with that. I struggled with school. I struggled with being deaf, and I compensated with that fear by just I adapted like the class clown act, which I thrived off. I got a lot of affirmation from that. I learned that like saying something horrible to someone kept people at distance, and I used that. I said I've said horrible things to so many people just because of how I felt, you know. At the end of junior school, this is something I didn't mention on Friday, but my dad sat us down and told us he was having an affair. He had been hiding it for 3 years. And we were like this Christian-going family. We did church every Sunday. We had people over on the week for like home cell, and like my dad was like, I don't know, I think it's like a deacon in the church. He like helped out, and from there, my conclusion was God didn't exist, because if we were such a Christian family, this wouldn't have happened. And I made it kind of all about me, like, because my brother and sister just left home, and now my parents were going through all of this, and I'd pulled that belief through the rest of my life, and I used that against my parents for the rest of my life. Just that one incident, which I jumped on. Again, I made it all about me, and it was, I was young then, and I guess you can't really, I mean, what happens, and I don't know how to deal with it, but I pulled that through. I mean, my mom forgave my dad before I did, which is crazy. High school was much the same. You know, I struggled with being like the slower pupil. I was still medicated until the age of 14, which like a French teacher took pity on me, I guess, and I got weaned off, or I got taken off the course, and things started coming right, but it was slow. Same as on the sports field as well. My brother was like a hero at the school, and I just couldn't fill those shoes, which I struggled with. Another thing I struggled with was my brother and my sister were only 2 years apart, and they were super tight. And I felt always separate and apart, but at never one moment did they ever kind of diss me or not exclude me from anything. They had a huge amount of patience for me. They always phoned. They were always there. They were like a second set of parents almost. You know, they always looked out for me, and my parents as well. They never missed sports games. My dad never put pressure on me or he never like shut me out for bad marks or anything. He always ever encouraged me, and that was my upbringing. You know, I went to a strict boarding school, and there wasn't much drinking there. You know, some weekends we would go out with mates, and I drank just like everyone else, or so I thought. But one thing that stands out for me was when we went out together. This was from about 16 onwards. They would all go and get a drink and sit down, and I'd go and stand at the bar and have a couple of shooters, and I'd grab a couple extra beers before I went to go and sit down, because I needed to get that buzz. I guess you could say, like, it was just the fear, you know, fear of being in a crowd. I realized that alcohol just made me feel amazing, you know. And although I was at a boarding school, every weekend that I got to go home, whatever, but for me personally, I drank in excess. I was always the one that had to run to the bathroom because of the amount I was drinking and get rid of it. And yeah, I thought that was normal. I really did. I thought that was normal behavior. When I left school, I completely switched it. I had a huge amount of freedom now compared to boarding school. I went to university in Grahamstown, and very quickly I found a drug of choice that I loved. It also substituted drinking because it was cheaper, and very quickly from like going out twice a week, it was every day. I needed something, be it drinking or using this drug of choice that got me through the day. I had to be high or drunk. And quickly after I just scraped through first year, I failed second year, and I came home and owned it to my dad what was going on. Then by then he had moved in with the lady he had an affair with, and that just festered, you know, for me. Started blaming. This is when I started blaming my parents for all the mistakes I started making. And, you know, when the common behavior that started happening was that as soon as things got tough, or I made enough mistakes, or really like stuffed things up, I had an excuse, and that excuse was, you know, you guys didn't follow through with your marriage. How come you weren't thinking of me when I was on my own, and all of this bullshit that I used to spin them. And yeah, my dad asked me if I wanted help, and I said yes. I think just to put out fires, and I started seeing a psychologist who suggested random drug tests, and we agreed to that. And very quickly I cottoned on that on the test sheet it was only marked off one substance, the substance that I'd owned, and underneath that was another substance which I thought, well, if they're testing me for this one, this one won't come up. Which worked. It didn't, and that became my drug of choice for the rest of my life. Alcohol and that drug in particular that was my cocktail for the rest of my life. I was given a second chance. My dad said to me, you know, you can look for another place to study, but you're grounded. You stay here until you find it, and you apply and you get in and all of that. And I broke every rule I could, you know, just despite him and my stepmom, who had just got married. I stole cars, I stole money, I used to speak to my stepmom like she was nothing. I had absolutely no respect for their decision, and I treated them shockingly. Sometimes I would just turn my phone off and disappear for a week. And I was 19 then, you know, 19, 20. I went back out again to try and study. After 6 months, I failed. Well, I didn't fail, they just didn't let me back because I was never there. And my dad, again, flew there, bailed me out, tried to figure out what was going on. And we had like a fallout, cut me off, and I moved to Cape Town, which was a huge blur. It was 2 years of debauchery, basically. Again, I didn't speak to my dad. I'd red button him every time he tried to phone me, and I was for about 6 months until I needed him. I needed something. I can't remember if it was help with something or I think it was money. But every single time I phoned him for money, he said, "I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm not giving you anything." And I held that against him for a long time. I would go to visit my mom, who had moved to Knysna, and I'd manipulate her. I'd emotionally blackmail her, actually, to giving me money. I would tell her what was going on with dad and my stepmom, and that would rev her up, and she would just fork the cash out, and that worked. She gave me a car. She always welcomed me in. I came back looking like absolute shit every weekend that I needed her, and I'd just use her. That's how it was. My family cottoned on quickly to what was going on for me, and it was suggested that I leave Cape Town and come and work in a little catering business with my sister. I love cooking, so did she, and we agreed that would be a good idea. The first week back, I met the mother of my child, and it was like everything was changing for me. You know, I wasn't this like, in my eyes, like this junkie anymore. I'd met someone who was attractive, and she was like a social butterfly, and I love that. And she fixed me. She fixed me for over a year. My using completely almost went out the window. I say that, but I was still smoking my drug of choice every day. But to me, I was just like a simple stoner. You know, can't accept me for that, and which people did, I think. As I said, she fixed me. The business, working in the catering game, it fixed me for a while. We got a lot of affirmation. We were between the two of us, my sister and I, we were quite good at what we did. And then after about a year, I just picked up that drug of choice, and all that behavior started happening, and I started lying and stealing again. And I basically held my family at ransom. They were always tiptoed around me. I was volatile. You know, again, using those words to keep people at bay. And my ex as well, you know, very quickly she learned that the right things to do and say around me, and that's how I was, you know. My mom in particular, again, just bore the brunt of it, you know. Whenever there was a problem or whenever I made a decision to now go out to my parents for their marriage again, she bore the brunt of it. I made her cry a lot. My dad was someone who just kept quiet, and I think, you know, later I realized just how much I'd hurt him. My sister as well, she picked up the pieces when I came back to work, kind of snotty-nosed and hungover, and she always took me back. She always gave me a second chance. She always deducted the money I'd stolen off my salary, and she said, right, the consequences have been met, and you must carry on working. Very quickly, my dad found out that I was back on that drug of choice, and we had a family meeting, like an intervention, and I agreed to go to rehab for 28 days. I wasn't in a 12-step rehab. I think after about 4 months of that, my ex stayed with me. She stuck with me through that whole thing. Again, after all the stuff I'd done, they all did. All forgave me again. And I came out, and for those 4 months, it was okay. We went on a little family trip to Mozambique, and I was clean, and everyone was affirming it, and it was good. I managed to manipulate them into thinking that I wasn't an addict because I'd now stayed clean for the window period of 4 months, and I didn't have a problem, which they believed somehow. And I just had that way with them. I think I could have got anything if I'd manipulated and emotionally blackmailed hard enough. And then, after I came out of there, about a year later, we fell pregnant. Ronnie and I were engaged then, and again, I had this revelation in bed while high that this kid was going to fix me, and I'll be this responsible person, and I could do business again properly, and I'd be and I'd change my ways, and I'd stop using that type of drug, and I'd be able to drink responsibly. And we tried the Christian route as well, and that lasted about 6 months. And then we had Tom, my son, who's turning 8 in June now. I must say it was a hugely emotional moment, although I couldn't stop using. By then, again, it had picked up. I was high the day he was born. Even the nights the 2 nights that the father had to leave the hospital in order to give them rest, I would go home and use, and I would wake up late and get back there late. Tom fell very ill. He caught pneumonia like 5 or 6 times in the space of 1 year, and we almost lost him a couple of times. And my using just skyrocketed. I use that as an excuse. I would do the day shift at the hospital when my ex would go home at night and sleep, and we'll just swap that around. And every time I was alone at home, I would use. I would steal, I would use, I would do exactly what I'd been doing for so long, drinking as well, uncontrollably. And then waking up with a hangover and going in and then looking after like a really sick child. He was about 18 months and things started getting better, but by then the damage was done. I think what I had done to my ex and to just that union of a household was so far gone. We were sleeping in different rooms, and we were young. I think by then I was 25 and she was 23, and we had got married in court just before Tom was born, and that was on the rocks. And I just couldn't stop using. We got like a 2-year-old now, and I would, when she went out to visit friends, I'd leave him at home as soon as he fell asleep and I'd go and meet my dealer. So I'd leave him alone, sometimes for an hour at home, alone, no one there. And I'd race back and rush in, and first thing I'd listen for was if he'd been crying or not. And I was like, every time I don't know if he did wake up or not, but every time I got home he was quiet, and I was like, okay, well, what I'm doing is okay then, because he's not waking up and I'm not there. So I felt like a triumph over it. I don't know, it was mad. Business as well. I used at work. I drank at work. I stole from work. I doctored invoices with my banking details so the clients would pay me straight into my account. Only when my sister was away, that's what I did, so the business would lose money. The way I treated my staff as well, I'd just go in there and rant and scream and kick and break things, and I just spiraled so quickly out of control. And then one day I came home. I'd just been away with my mom and my brother. I think it was her 62nd birthday or something like that. And my ex, we went to sleep, and I snuck out and I used in the car, and I came back in and she was awake and she was sitting there, and then, right then and there she left me. And she never gave in to anything, and I threw the kitchen sink at her for about 6 months. But in those 6 months, you would think by then that like someone who's just lost his family, failing business, the respect of his family and love and all of that would stop and be like, geez, maybe I do have a problem, and I do need help. And I was just powerless, man. I just couldn't stop. I don't think I actually wanted to. I was so spiteful and angry with everyone, my dad, my parents, her now, resentful towards my son for being sick, which is mad. It's all mad. I drank and used every single night for 6 months. I moved in with a guy who was in the same kind of boat as me, and we just fed off each other. And we just spent most nights in Mshlanga town. And I would rock up to work late. My sister just had her second kid as well. She was juggling kids. And there I was, just involving everyone in my mess and dragging them through it. My dad sat me down. He was helping us with our business for a while, and he said, why don't you take all your shit and pack it all up and leave Durban. Go and do whatever it is you're doing away from your son and your mother, and let your ex move on, and your sister as well. Just piss off, basically, he said. And I said, fine, I will. And within a month, I left. I went overseas. I got a yachting course under my belt somehow. And for 3 years, I bounced around the world thinking that I'd left the problem behind, and it just got worse and worse. The people who I befriended and manipulated into thinking I was this type of person quickly realized that I wasn't, and I just bounced around groups like I'd always done. I'd run away from problems like I'd always done. As soon as things got tough, I'd jump ship and I'd move, and I'd somehow get onto another boat, which would take me somewhere else. And then I settled in Spain for a while because that's where I knew I could get my drug of choice, quickly and easily. I had 1 or 2 friends who were just like me. One of them actually hung himself 2 days ago. And we just fixed off each other. We fed off each other, and we did some terrible things. But quickly, consequences just built up and built up. By then, the guilt and shame, I knew deep down what I was doing was not okay, but I knew I could just go out and get rid of it. I could almost I had a spring in my step walking to the bars that I used to go to, because I knew for a brief moment I would have escaped that hell that I was living. And sometimes I wouldn't Skype my son for a month. I would always have an excuse. I wouldn't send money back to my mom that I owed her. I always had an excuse. And again, it just carried on. And it just became this monotonous. By the grace of God, I missed a boat that I was supposed to start working on. I don't know where I'd be if I got on that boat, but I missed the flight, basically. I didn't fill in the correct paperwork, and I wasn't able to get to that boat on time. And they'd moved, and because of that monumental F-up, I think that just sent me over the edge, because that boat was going to fix all my problems. The paycheck was big enough for it to fix all my problems. And I just went on this 1.5 month rampage. I spent a huge amount of money, I won't go into details, but it was shocking. And I woke up one day and my phone was ringing, and I could see it was my dad's number, and I realized that I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family for a month and a half. And this would have been the 3rd time he sent someone to look for me, and if I hadn't answered that call, he would have gone on a plane himself to come and find me. Again, putting my dad through this terrible kind of experience of dealing with a son like me. And I told him, he said to me, can't you just sort your shit out like you've done before, and just get on another boat and just, enough now, your ex has moved on, she's met someone, your son's doing fine, we forgive you, just move on, He used to say that a lot. And I emotionally blackmailed him again, probably one of my most hectic ones I've done. I said to Dad, if I'm not on a plane in 2 days, you'll never see me again. And within 2 days, I was on a plane and I was home, on the condition that I checked into treatment. So 2 days later, I checked into the house on the hill. And I like what I saw. I bumped into someone in particular who I used to see at the bar I used to frequent in Mshlanga, and he was doing okay, just done a step 5, and he was on this pink cloud. And he's played such an intricate part in the 2 years or in the 18 months it took before I came into treatment for real. Guys, I can't stress enough how important it is just to. For me, how important it was for me just to listen, and maybe just humble myself and look to see what other people are doing. I came into treatment thinking I was pretty level-headed guy, like, and I just had these terrible things that happened to me, which actually weren't that bad, just really a divorce, and that I'd been dealt such a raw deal, you know, with a sick son and stuff, and quickly I realized that, like, the stuff I'd gone through wasn't nearly as bad as some people, but even going on that, I didn't think I was an addict. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I thought I was special and different, and I just had a rough patch, and I just needed to sober up for a bit, put out some fires, and get on with it. So I played the game. I didn't get concerned. I applied like all the boarding school manners and all that stuff, and I just adapted, and I was okay with that. You know, I was thinking, you know, like I was made house leader, and I don't know, I didn't work on what I had to work on. I just portrayed what I thought was right. And I basically was dishonest the whole way through treatment. You know, I had an agenda. I knew I was just going to go out and try and drink and use successfully again. But I told my family what they needed to hear, and whether people could see my bullshit or not, that all came out in the end. I did everything that I thought people wanted me to do, not what I had to do. You know, I did everything that looked good, and to, like, you know, I can't regret anything because this experience benefits others. But like, had I worked on the stuff I had to work on and do it as was suggested, I think, you know, when my mom died while I was in treatment, I might have been able to cope with it and not gone through the next year of mayhem that I put my family through again, dealing with you know, my mom's death. You know, she died just before New Year, and I was granted some leave out of the house to go and bury her, and I came back and I was just resentful to the house because they'd let me go and see my family, they'd let me do what I needed to do, but I came back and I was in such a bad way, I just completely shut off. It was like hell for me, because I just didn't want to be there. It was too far down, and I left. And 5 days later, I relapsed. I mean, I hadn't worked on anything, so of course, like the person I'd arrived with was just a big, you know, and then all that dishonesty. Of course, like it was my only solution then, you know. And I went back into treatment straight, like about a month later, and again, like I wasn't willing to change. I didn't believe I was like everyone in this room, you know. I thought I was special and different. I thought, you know, some of those steps apply, but not those ones, or those suggestions are right for me, but those ones not so much, and I'll just pretend I've done them, or like I'll just be dishonest about it and say I've done it. And that's again the same person manipulating, lying, carrying on, putting on a good show. You know, I wasn't once concerned. I think I was concerned for not being concerned. And like not much came of it, you know. I like just this dishonest person. And then I went to the halfway house, and I didn't share anything. I didn't call my sponsor nearly enough. I didn't check anything. I hold resentment because I wasn't allowed to see my family. I wasn't willing just to see that maybe staying away from the people that you've damaged for so long and made sick, and also who enable you for yourself. Again, I hadn't done the work to realize that. I walked in there thinking I was owed something, but I had no balls to own that stuff. You know, it was too far gone. You know, I'd come in dishonest, and I stayed that way. And then I relapsed again. You know, some behavior happened before that, like very dodgy stuff, and which shouldn't really happen. And a week later, after owning it, I'd relapsed again. And I remember I spoke to my sponsor, and he said, and I said, "Are you surprised that I've relapsed?" And he said, "No," you know, which pissed me off even more, you know. And then I came back into treatment again 4 days later after 4-day bender. My ex said to me, you know, on the way in, I went in for my son originally, you know, because she said, "This is your last chance. Otherwise, you will have no access to him, because you can't keep coming back into his life, promising the world and then disappearing. So I went in on that fear. On that, I was still dishonest for the first week. Still spoke about the shit that I was speaking about before, like the successful chef dickhead from Europe who's made lots of money, and I've just had a rough patch, and something, I don't know what it was inside me, but I remember I went to you, Caleb, and I was like, I have to own something in group today. And you asked me what, and I said, no, I've been dishonest. And you said, cool, I'll give you a slot. And I stood up and I told people like actually who I was. There wasn't a lot of stuff, but it was a start for me. And I shook. I was like, I've never felt that way before. It was like something died. And then from then on, like, and just the relief I got from that. I wanted to leave that whole week. I was obsessing over using. And after that, before standing up and owning that stuff, I actually went and sat down with someone in the Philips and got really honest about what I really wanted to do. And that was the first time I really opened up to someone. And then on that, I went and I just owned some stuff in group, which again exposed me, and it hurt and it felt weird, and I shook and I was useless for a while. But I think that got the ball rolling. Also, just maybe I'm an addict of that, or an alcoholic of that type, of your guys' type, and which humbled me. And then I just realized, like, shit, I've got to go and share all my step one stuff. And that was suggested. It's like, don't share about anything else. Don't share about recovery, because fuck all about that. Just go and share your step one, all the cuck you're writing down now. And I did. And I shared more and more. And I think some people, I shared stuff in front of women that I would never share. But I needed to. That's what I had to do for me, because I finally wanted it. Like, the fear of losing my son had gone. I think the fear of kind of losing my life, like, replaced that, because the way I drank and used on that relapse weekend was like I've never done before, and it was painful. It was like suicidal almost. That's how I felt. And thank God for that. That 18 months of hell, of dishonesty, of pretending to be someone I'm not. Like, I got exposed. I mean, the relapse exposed me. I mean, someone was sharing that, like, he heard an awesome share from me the one weekend, and the next week I was in treatment, like in a mess. And that just goes to show how powerful this disease really is if you don't do exactly what's in that book. I asked questions in group, questions that I should have known the answers to in the first time I was in treatment. But I asked, like, how do I do a proper inventory in the evening again? And they both looked to me, the guys in Big Book, and they're like, okay, we'll be back there again. And I had to ask that stuff. And I try to keep it as simple as I could in treatment this time around. Like, being honest was at the forefront, and then just putting in the work. Even though I didn't want to do it, I put it in. I buddied a lot of guys, and I got into it. There was one guy in particular that I really struggled with, and because I couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to gym and I wanted to run and stuff, but I had to watch this guy, and he jumped the fence and he disappeared, and I was terrible at it, but I failed, and that's a big thing of this last year I've learned is learning how to fail and be okay with it. I'm not perfect, and that took a while to I thought I was, someone told me the only thing you need to know about God is you're not him. And because I thought I was pretty amazing, and then, like, making all these mistakes made me realize that how defective I can be, and I'm not all that, Sure, that was an incredible 3 months. I worked hard, and I changed things that I used to do in there, like personal stuff, and just got real. With myself and with my sponsor and with a few guys, sharing stuff that, like, guys share, and just in the house as well, and I just worked on it, leaving the house and going back into the halfway house again. I'd spent 10 months prior in the halfway house, 8 months, and I was told, you're doing another year, which was hard, but I wanted it, and I prayed about it, I meditated over that kind of stuff, and it helped. I realized in early recovery I couldn't be on Facebook. I couldn't watch the kind of documentaries I was watching. The music I was listening to was euphoric. The old ideas I had of what I wanted to go back and do was stuff that I had to expose as well. And I just sat tight, and I got to my meetings, I did a bit of the first job I had was actually for like a little play production, 60 minutes, which kind of got the ball rolling for me. It was simple, but it was easy enough for me to cope with. And yeah, from there I don't know. I used to come home and just own my stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how important that was to me. Is just to come home and own shit, even though it was dodgy or mad. Just letting it out, you know. I think before I thought like you can't own something like that. You're in recovery now, but that's what I realized. It's not what it's about. It's just making myself vulnerable and feeling that humility is so important for someone like me, you know, an alcoholic of my type. And then things kind of progressed. I got a little job at the golf course there, which I kind of maintained, and I got to, and I did what I needed to do. And then this big opportunity came, which I went in there just so arrogant, you know. I thought I was going to make like the best restaurant in Scottsboro, or whatever bullshit was going on in my head, you know. I thought I was going to be sharing at this 1 year share, being like, you know, I still run an amazing restaurant this day, and all this bullshit, you know. And I failed, I failed so hard. I tried, but what I realized is that I was someone that couldn't say no. I had to say yes to everything. Yeah, of course I can do that. So self-reliant, you know, not maybe putting God first in it and walking through that fear and just saying, you know what, actually maybe I can't do these things, you know. And very quickly I got overwhelmed, you know. I didn't work the program to the best of my ability in that regard, and I had to bail. There were other reasons as well, but I mean, if I look at it like honestly, I had to bail, and that was hard, you know. And then on top of the arrogance and the other defects that were pointed out to me, a big one was just learning how to fail, man, and owning it. Being like, yeah, I failed. So huge for me. Just a quick thing about just things that's going on for me at the moment. You know, my ex and I, we've struggled for the last 5 years. You know, she told me in treatment, I think it was my second time, beginning of my second stint. She said, I won't hold it against you if you relinquish your fathering rights to Greg, Tom's stepdad, because we don't see this working for you, you know. You know, and now on the flip side, you know, I spent Christmas Eve there. I woke up in their home with my son and them. We call ourselves a modern family. They've given me a set of their house keys. And the only reason why this has happened is because of this program. And God allowing me these opportunities to work on those amends. I mean, I don't know what happened, but after I left treatment the third time, they welcomed me back into their home. They were like, had a completely different, I don't know, they were so understanding and loving. And I don't know what happened there, but something happened. You know, God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I was able to make direct amends to my dad. He's not well, and we don't know what's going to happen there. But you know, I was able to go out and make it about him. You know, we went away for a week, and you know, the first 2 times out of treatment, no one said anything about me changing. But my family, my stepmom and my dad, has been like, "There's something different about you." And again, that's for me. That's God. Like this 12 steps to that relationship with God, that two-way street, knowing what to do. Phoning and checking stuff, just to make sure I'm doing things right, making mistakes, but working on it, you know. That was an incredible moment. We just drove around for 2 hours in a game park, and I just told him about all the things that there was nothing more or less he could have done. It was all me, you know. And I owned a few things about, you know, that time I shut you out for this was actually because I was hiding that, and he was so grateful, you know, and he owned some stuff to me too. And it was such a unifying bonding experience. Like God was so present in that car, and we felt it. It's such an amazing experience. I look forward to my other direct amends one day, you know. My sister, this is someone who I've lied and used and manipulated, especially at work and stuff, has allowed me to stay in a home for the next month while I get on my feet. They've given me a set of house keys, you know, like I looked after their house last night and their dogs while they were away, and there's no message to check up or anything like that. You know, the last time I stayed there, when things were getting a bit hectic, I disappeared for 9 days, and I blame them for a lot of stuff too, and now we sit down, we talk about God together, My brother and his fiance as well, they always ask me to come over and look after their dog or just come and hang out, whereas I didn't get that before. My mom, she's not here, but what I realize is that my amends to her is working this to the best of my ability, but another one is just to be there for my family, and like a small thing like making tea at my family was a big thing. That's what she did, and I've started doing that at my sister's house. There's a song I sing in my car now. Like I belted out. I belted it out all the way up here. There's a song that she used to play, and I sing that. And there's just these things that God has allowed me to realize and practice. And it's been the most incredible journey. This year has been really hard. Honesty is flipping hard for me. I struggle. But I try and get honest. I try and own my stuff, expose myself, and the result of it is amazing. From there, after a problem's been established, the solution is all there. It's all in the book there, and that's been God's God working in my life, just through these 12 steps, and through the people of this fellowship. Just exposing to saying, I'm actually not doing okay today, and someone sharing some stuff back, and practicing that God intimacy has been such a gift for me this year. Friends, maintaining friendships, amazing as well. I've had to force myself to pick up the phone and message people and check up on them and try and remember of what they were telling me the previous week and asking them how that's been going. Again, that's God reminding me to do this stuff, It's taken a while to learn about what recovery is about, and I'm nowhere near close to wrapping my head around the whole thing. But what I do know is that the faith, there's a lot of trust and faith and trust installed in the experiences I've had now. I never got that. It's just string together some good experiences in recovery, and you'll see why. And now I see that. Sometimes I drag it out, but I'm so grateful that I was allowed back into that treatment center. I'm so grateful my family picked me up, my friends picked me up. This fellowship allowed me back and loved me unconditionally. And now I know 100% sure I'm an alcoholic, therefore I can't have another drink. And that's cool with me, because my life now is so full. Family, fellowship. My son depends and trusts me. We play games, we build Lego. Surfing and going to the beach blows my mind now. I don't have to be stoned to be on the bloody beach. How awesome is that? I don't have to have anything to cope with, because there's a replacement. And I'm just so grateful that it was allowed to me. It's God's grace only. I found God again, which is, compared to how it was when I was 13, God didn't factor in my life. And now it's I think I've prayed 3, 4, 5 times today already, because I've been in fear about the share and all that stuff. But I would never be that type of person. Guys, I'm just so grateful that I've been allowed this opportunity. As I said, a friend of mine from Spain hung himself 2 days ago as a result of this, because he didn't have a solution. But for the grace of God, I'm sitting here, and things are good now. But it's going to take more work. I heard second year is a bit harder, but I've got the solution. If I practice it every day, I'll be okay, and I firmly believe that. So thanks for letting me share.